Hi, I'm Nikki, the Obsessive Bookseller, and welcome to episode 2 of Project Sci-Fi. If you missed my original introduction to this series, I'll post a link to it. But essentially, I want to fill my time with more science fiction, and the only way to do that for me is to make a plan, because if it's not written, it's not real. I made myself a very visual, massive TBR list on Goodreads, and I'll go through periodically and pick out new titles that I want to explore from there, and then kind of document my journey with it. I'm actually filming this intro after the fact. You'll notice that my backdrop has changed. I did a massive reorganization of my bookshelves to get some of my favorites higher up. So, it'll change throughout the rest of the video, and then I'll end it with the same scene. I could have gotten away with it had I not rearranged my library, but here we are. Anyway, overall it was a great month of sci-fi reading, and I will show you what I got done. Okay, I am finally sitting here at my desktop, ready to look at my list of possibilities and pick out a new book for the sci-fi project. There are actually quite a few here that are jumping out to me as possibilities. I have been really wanting to get into the Valor's Choice, the Confederation series by Tanya Huff. Pandora's Star has been high on my list as well. If those books weren't so massive, I may have already read them. Scrolling here, Semiosis, especially after reading Children of Time and appreciating all of the world building aspects and biological components. Yeah, really looking forward to that one at some point. And then definitely Children of Ruin. I've got that one on order, and I am kind of close to next in line at the library for another copy for audio. Anyway, Sins of Our Fathers, the Expanse novella that caps off the series. I will definitely be picking that one up this month. And then surprisingly, of everything on here, I am feeling drawn towards trying the Foundation series by Isaac Asimov. I've been selling them for years. They seem like quick reads. I know from what I've heard that they are more conceptual than character driven, but I think it's in a small enough dose that, especially if I combine it with one of the more space operatic ones like Valor's Choice or Pandora's Star, I think I'll be doing okay. So anyway, out of everything on here, those are the ones that are singing to me right now. We shall see which one I actually pick up first. Stay tuned. So I have committed. I have picked a book that I'm going to focus on next, and it actually goes along with my incomplete series challenge in that it will be wrapping up a series. So I've got Rapture, book 3 in the Beldam Apocrypha series by Cameron Hurley. I've heard so many good things about this series. When I started reading about it, people were excited on Goodreads, like, oh, can't wait for you to experience this one. It's one of my favorites. And a bunch of people mentioned, like, people whose thoughts about books have a lot of clout with me because I really trust their opinions, said, oh yeah, read the short stories along with this series. So as I was going to pick up the final book, I thought, I'm gonna just bite the bullet and see what I can find and read the short stories. So to that end, I read one of the prequel short stories. It was about 20 pages. It's called Afterbirth. And I have to say, if you're thinking about starting the series, it might be worth the 99 cents to read that one. For me, it added a lot of context to the world, and it gave it a lot more depth, even though it was such a short story. And it gave you an introduction to the tone that you're going to get out of the series and the kind of like the visceral descriptors that you're going to get without really throwing you into the deep end. So highly recommend that one. I also downloaded Apocalypse Nyx. It's a couple of novellas between books 1 and 2. There's a significant timeline jump between the two books. And I was applauding that because most authors don't have the gall to jump that far forward. But no, she didn't have the gall to do that. She just had some novellas instead of a full book in between. So I'm kind of filling in the gaps of what happened in there, because there was one character dynamic between the main character and this other one that I didn't think had really its moment to shine. But obviously when you get to the second book, there's a lot of depth and history there. Well, I'm going to get to read about the depth and history in this compilation. And then one more 20-page short story, The Seams Between the Stars. I'm going to wrap that one up as well before, finally diving into this third book. And then I feel like I will have experienced everything that Beldam Apocrypha has to offer. The only thing I'm worried about is all of that cool world building that I'm getting out of the short stories. I'm worried that I won't get the answers that I want out of this third book. Because the more I know about the world, the more I want to know about the world, but she has so many creative things going on that the focus is not on some of the things that I want to know more about, but she just has so many things crammed in there. What I will say, I did start Apocalypse Nyx, and just like, I don't know, few chapters into the story, the bug magic is a lot more prevalent than it has been for a couple of other things that I've read so far. So I love that we're digging more into the bug magic. Anyway, for weird sci-fi, this is totally fitting the bill, and I will probably be spending the next week wrapping up everything to do with this series, and then I can pick my next title. It's my favorite part. Hi, Nikki here with a Project Sci-Fi update. I finished the 2 short stories in the Beldam Apocrypha series, as well as Apocalypse Nyx. I think I'm landing at a 3-star for that compilation. The first novella was a 4 out of 5 star. I thought it added a lot to the series as a whole. Really gave a lot of good character backstory, made them feel more human. There was a bunch of scenes in there that I thought should have been included in the main series, if nothing else than to help ground us with the character. Because we would go through these jumps of emotional change in the main series, but without any context on how the characters got there. So it seemed to me as though they woke up the next day a new person. So what this shows me is there actually was a section from point A to point B. It's just included in this set of shorter stories. The rest in the collection were fun, but they didn't really add anything for me, and so I don't know, I kind of found it a struggle to get through because it wasn't adding anything to the rest of the series, so I felt like I was reading it just for the sake of reading it. So that's what pulled my rating down. And unfortunately, while I was all gung-ho to start the next one, I think it kind of knocked my enthusiasm off a little bit, and I'm really not in the mood to continue at the moment. So I'm going to pick up something else, and then I will come back to that one probably later in the month. But that means that I get to look at my list and figure out what I want to pick up next. Good morning, Nikki here with a Project Sci-Fi update. So I made a decision. I decided to go with Semiosis by Sue Burke. It's part of a duology. I have the second book, but I don't have the first one. What sold me on it was the biological aspect. I've been really craving some really creative sci-fi like that lately. I'm about 20% in, and this is definitely a conceptually driven sci-fi as opposed to a character-driven one. There are characters, but I don't personally feel any sort of connection to them. And also at the moment, it's turning into like a multi-generational type of story. I want to like this one so much. It seems right up my alley, but here is the problem that I'm having with it. I don't read the backs of books for a reason before starting them, but in this case, everything from the title to the tagline and just basic descriptions of what I've heard the book is about gave me an idea of what to expect before going in. The problem is I know more about what's going on because of those indicators than the characters do. And so it's a case of what I think is called dramatic irony, where the characters are in suspense because they're trying to figure out what's going on this planet, but I don't feel the suspense because I already know what's going on as the audience. And I don't think I was meant to this early on, but the marketing gave it away, and I freaking hate that. For me, reading is very much about the discovery process, and so far it has been really cool to explore this new world, but all of these little signs of what's really going on this planet are coming into play, and I think had I not already known what was going on, it would have been incredibly engaging. But as it is, I feel a couple of steps back from the story than where I really want to be. Right now, the world building is dazzling me enough that I would like to continue reading, and I want to see if I can get to a point where I feel excited to find out what happens next. Because after all, I know what's going on this planet, but I don't know how the humans are going to deal with it, so maybe that'll be a point of interest going forward. Ideally, once I finish that one, I'll pick up Interference, the second book, and finish out this duology. That way, I can work on my Project Sci-Fi without interfering with my incomplete series challenge. But considering how many books I have in sci-fi that are part of massive series, I don't know if that's going to work every time, but yeah, we'll see. If I don't feel compelled to pick up the second book right away, I might listen to that as a sign that I might need to unhaul it. Anyway, it's a good book, and if I weren't one of those people who really does crave the surprise of discovering the unknown, I'd be liking it a little more than I am. But it's still early. I'm only at 20%. Hi, Nikki here with a Project Sci-Fi update. I'm continuing in Semiosis. I'm about 70% through, and I'm not sure about this one. The whole draw to the story to me was the flora and fauna, and while it plays a role in the story, the real highlight was at the very beginning when they were just exploring all of this new landscape and kind of falling victim to the dangers of it. But it has devolved into a multi-generational drama. And that whole dramatic irony I mentioned, where I was sure they were going to figure out what was going on sooner than later, still really hasn't happened to my satisfaction yet. So I'm still at an arm's distance, and we are on the umpteenth generation. So each time I get attached to a character, we switch. And I find the evolution of the story interesting, and it's bizarre enough that I'm like kind of morbidly curious to see what's going to happen next. But at the same time, I'm like, this is just kind of a mediocre sci-fi. I'd hate to say it. Depending on how well it ends, I may or may not pick up the second one right away just for a sense of completionism, because I have a feeling if I don't read it right away, I probably won't read it for a really long time. But while I had that going on, I had a couple of spare minutes, and so I read Home by Martha Wells. This is a short story I missed somehow. Evidently it's book like 4.5. Came out in 2020, and when I heard about it, I thought it was new. No, it's not new. It's like 10 pages long. But I really wish that I had read it back then, because it was the only Murderbot story that wasn't from its perspective, and I appreciated that. It gave insight from an important character of Murderbot and its role in their team. And it offered just enough substance to be worth my time. A solid little story. Because it wasn't longer, I don't know how I could justify anything more than just like a 3-star. Like, I liked it. I'd read it again, especially if I reread the series. I'd probably read it where it was supposed to have been placed. And when I check in next, it'll probably be with my official review of Semiosis, and then from there we'll figure out what I'm going to read next. Project Sci-Fi update. I have finished Semiosis by Sue Burke, and I am ready to give an official review on it. This is really the first book I've picked up kind of in an experimental light for Project Sci-Fi. Most of the other ones I kind of already had planned to read. And so, yeah, for my first experimental book, this one was a bust for me. I didn't enjoy anything about the book. First of all, and I know I've mentioned this, the dramatic irony where the reader goes in already knowing a lot more than the characters do about what's going on. And so right away I'm disconnected from everything by a couple of paces, because I don't feel the drama. I'm not like, oh, what's happening here? The suspense is killing me. No, I don't feel the suspense. I'm just reading about the characters feeling the suspense. And what's more, that kind of lasted the entire book. It was not a very engaging read from that standpoint. And then the disconnection got a little bit worse with each new POV jump that we did, because this is a multi-generational book where you get like a chapter or two with each character, and then we jump generations. And so as soon as you get kind of acclimated with the character, we switch it. And so there we are, like a few more arms distance away. Like lots of arms, like at least 7 arms in this book. And I did overall enjoy some of the characters, most of the characters actually. I really enjoyed reading from their perspectives, but like I said, we didn't get really a long enough time with any of them. And honestly, the draw to the book for me was the biological aspect and the flora and fauna, and really exploring this wild world. But it turned into this narrowly focused, kind of like an anthropological approach. And normally I'd be all for that, but I think it was far too simple to keep my interest even for that angle. So I either needed like rich cultural development, or I wanted like the cool biological stuff, but I kind of got neither. Got a little bit of both, but not enough to my satisfaction. But I kept reading hoping that there would be an eventual payoff, and especially the fauna of this world would have a huge role to play. And it did, but like, I don't know. The best part of the book for me was the very first chapter when they landed on the planet. The author took a lot of care to really enmesh you in this world and make you feel the wildness of it, and a lot of great descriptions, and that kind of faded. There really wasn't a focus on that through the rest of the book. You were just kind of you could have been on Earth except for an occasional weird plant here or there, or weird animal. And the fauna did get a little more interesting, but it still, even then, it just wasn't explored to my satisfaction. So I don't know, I went into it for the biology and ended up with kind of a social drama, and then with a intelligence being that I just didn't like what she did with it. There were so many different ways she could have represented the semiosis part of this series, and actually I understand why that's the title. I think it's fully appropriate, but the entity to me read more like an AI on a ship who already knew a lot about human behavior and physiology and was just kind of going off of that. And so to me, it didn't read like a plant. And honestly, because of that AI comparison, the book wasn't unique at all. I've read a whole bunch of AI with their own ideas, manipulating the humans type of things. So I finished the book and thought, I just don't care enough to read on to the second one. I don't like anything about the execution of this novel, and that's worrisome. So I went out seeking spoiler reviews for the second book and decided that, yeah, I'm really glad I didn't read on, because I don't think I would have liked the stuff that happened in the second book. And for those of you who have followed me for any length of time, you know what a completionist I am. So the fact that I didn't care enough that I was okay seeing spoilers is like an indication of how much this one I did not enjoy. And one of the spoilers mentioned like, oh, well, she could have summarized the entire second book into an epilogue at the end of the first book and it would have been stronger. And I haven't read the second book, but I can appreciate that kind of review, because I'm like, yeah, that's reading the summary of the second book. I'm like, yeah, if she had included a little bit of that, like more depth in some of the things in the first book, and then just had a killer epilogue, I probably would have finished the book a little more interested. But it didn't go anywhere. It just kind of petered out. And all of this like cool buildup and my idea of what the story would be totally different. So expectations did play a role here. If you lean towards more anthropological and biological sci-fi, this one may work for you. I looked up a bunch of peer reviews after finishing the book and was totally floored at how many rave reviews among my Goodreads friends there were for this title. So I am definitely in the minority in not liking it here. And be sure to look up a trigger warning before diving into this book. So with all of that said, I am coming in at a solid 2 out of 5 stars. It was just okay. I'm getting organized with my life and have decided to construct the written reviews before doing the video reviews. So if you're interested in the other books you might like recommendations that I usually do tied to book reviews, I'll link my written review on Goodreads in the description, and you can click on that to go see other books you might like. That was a bust, but I think one of the ones I'm going to pick up next is probably a continuation to a series I've already started and liked. Particularly the Children of Time series, but don't quote me on that. This is one of 2 categories where I'm really allowing myself to mood read. Hello, Nikki here with the Project Sci-Fi update. So my next experiment was Sins of Our Fathers by James S.A. Corey. It's book 9.5 in the Expanse series, which means it comes after the final book. And I was kind of hoping going into it, it would be a more in-depth exploration as to what's really going on in this universe, what really happened, kind of giving me more answers that the final book didn't. And that's not at all what this one was, but I still really enjoyed it. So ending the series at book 9 kind of left me feeling like nostalgic, happy, sad, underwhelmed. I was in it for a certain number of answers. I thought the pacing of that one was all off. I thought an introduction of one character was completely unnecessary. It's a whole thing. So I left the series really excited that I had read it. I've been reading it for years, ever since the 3rd book came out. and it has been with me a while, and I'm sad that I don't have any more Expanse books to look forward to. Now, with this one, what this one did was remind me why I love the series to begin with. Everything was stripped down. It was just about an examination of character, and it's that brilliant work of making you feel like you're reading about real people that I love so much about these authors. Such a human experience, and somehow this novella managed to not only give me that fulfilling connection to the characters, but also make me feel a lot of nostalgia about everything that happened in the series up to this point. They didn't like blatantly talk about stuff, but it's things that are still relevant to the characters in this book. It has shaped what they have now become, and the trajectory of the story was incredibly satisfying to me, and I left the whole thing with a lot of very positive emotions. I'm glad to be ending The Expanse with positive emotions, because that's really what it's been about for me. There have been some really epic moments and some things that hit me very profoundly, but most of the time it was about the small character studies that made the series special, so I do like that this got back to that a little bit. And I do believe that's what was missing for me in the final book. Anyway, absolutely loved it. I'll have a link to my Goodreads review if you want a list of other books you might like in the description. And I am coming in at a 4 out of 5 stars for this one. Some highs and lows. No 5-star standouts this time, but I really wasn't expecting there to be. Children of Time kind of stands on a pedestal. But still, I'm very happy that I read Sins of Our Fathers. That was definitely a highlight for me, and I really liked Home by Martha Wells. And the other ones, meh. At least I was able to unhaul a book from my collection, so all progress is good progress. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me on this journey, and I hope to catch you on the next episode.